Hi guys, it's Angie with Fun Endeavors Tie-Dye Lab. Today let's compare a dye over the ice to a dye under the ice. I get asked that question a lot, how shirts look different depending upon where you put the dye. So I thought let's go ahead and do an experiment and see for ourselves. I've done a comparison video on this technique before, but it's been a while. I'm going to start off by spiraling two shirts, and I'm using the same kind of shirt. I'm using two extra large Gildan Ultra Cotton shirts. They've both been pre-washed, then I soaked them in the same soda ash solution and I wrung them out at the same time. I'm going to place the spiral down in the lower portion of the shirt. So I'm finding a place in that area where I'd like to start the spiral, and I'm using my locking tweezers and a microwave splatter guard plate for the spirals. By the way, I also have noticed that one side of the shirt, whenever I do spirals, is tidier than the other. I want the front side to be tidy, so I usually start the spirals with the front side of the shirt facing down. The folds on the part of the shirt that is against the table are usually the ones that look the best. The splatter guard also helps to keep the folds on the top side, or the side that I'm actually starting the spiral on, a little bit more uniform in size. Once I get the shirt spiraled, I'm going to hold the folds in place with some rubber bands. Okay, so I have one shirt spiraled, and I'm going to go ahead and spiral the other shirt the same way. I put the shirts aside after I tied them, and they ended up drying out before I actually applied the dye. They don't have to be completely dry though. You can dye them when they're damp. Okay, so I've placed each one of the shirts inside of a plastic colander, and I purchased these cheap colanders from the Dollar Tree dollar store. I wanted to incline these shirts, and the rack that I normally use to incline shirts, I'm actually doing another shirt on. So I decided to use these colanders. And then because of the shape of them, since they're bowl shaped, I decided to put a baseball size wiffle ball down in the bottom so that it would make the shirt a little bit more level. I have the colanders down inside of a plastic tub, and the colander over on the left-hand side is going to be the one that I'm going to place the dye over the top of the ice. For both of these shirts, I thought I would use some royal purple from Grateful Dyes and divide my shirt into 3 areas using the royal purple. On the shirt over on the right, where I can see what I'm doing a little bit better, I'm trying to take the royal purple into the center of the spiral. On the shirt over on the left, the dye over the ice, I'm just kind of trying to replicate what I did on the shirt on the right. If you'll notice though, when I'm applying the dye over the top of the ice, it's really spreading out a lot because it's immediately starting to melt into that ice. In the 3 sections, I'm going to place Noble Purple from Happy Cat Tie-Dye, Mom Jeans from Dharma, and Almondine from Happy Cat Tie-Dye. These are all really good color splitting colors, and so I'm hoping to see some of those splits on these shirts. The Mom Jeans is a special order color from Dharma, and if you can't get it anymore from their site without having to order a large quantity of it, you can go out to a Facebook page called Tie-Dye Supplies Marketplace, And usually there are people selling these special order colors out there. They buy them in the larger quantities and repackage them down in smaller quantities to sell. I'll put a link to that Facebook page down below in the description for this video. I'm trying to put an equal amount of dye on both shirts, but the shirt over on the left is a little more difficult because it's just melting into that ice and spreading out so quickly. By the way, whenever I do these experiment videos, I'm showing you what would happen if I did each of these shirts individually with the technique that I use to tie-dye. We all kind of have a little bit different technique when we tie-dye. You know, some people use a whole lot of dye, some people just barely sprinkle any dye over the shirts. So if you tried to replicate this experiment, your shirts would probably look pretty different depending upon the technique that you use. But you know what? There's really no wrong way to tie-dye. Okay, so now I'm going to sprinkle a little bit of additional soda ash over the top of both of the shirts. Then I'm going to add some ice on the shirt on the right. I tried to put close to the same amount of ice on both of the shirts, but the one over on the left has already started to melt a little bit. Okay, so to incline the shirts, I'm going to take the colanders out of this container, place a plastic basket down inside of the container, and then use that to incline the shirts. I left the shirts alone and allowed the ice to melt. I had a few pretty good sized pieces of undissolved dye on the shirt on the right, so I added just a couple more pieces of ice to those areas. And then after they melted, I allowed the shirts to process for about 36 hours before I rinsed them out. For part of that time too, I took this container outside so that they could process in the heat. I'm starting with the dye over the ice shirt. And as you can see when I turn it over, it looks like I still have quite a few white areas. By the way, in tie-dye forums, you may see this referred to as DOI. The dye under the ice is DUI. I'm starting to rinse the shirts in cold water to rinse out the soda ash, and I'm going to rinse them both the same way. Once I rinse in cold water to rinse out the soda ash, then I'm going to untie the shirts and warm the water up to hot and rinse in hot water to try to rinse out the excess dye that didn't bond with the fabric. To avoid a really long rinse cycle, I go ahead and soak the shirts. So I run some really hot water in my utility sink, add a little bit of Blue Dawn dish detergent to the water, and allow the shirts to soak. Because they're the same colors, I'm going to go ahead and soak them together. The Blue Dawn is pH neutral, and so it will help neutralize any of the soda ash that I might have missed in my rinse cycle, and keep any of the excess dye that is soaked out of the shirts from rebonding someplace else on the shirt. When the water cools off, I change it out and I continue that soaking process until my water is remaining almost clear. Then I'm going to put the shirts in my washing machine along with some Dharma's professional textile detergent and wash them on a hot water cycle. So the shirts have been washed, dried, and ironed, and let's compare them and see if there's a difference. Okay, so here's a quick look at both of the shirts together. The dye over the ice is on the left and the dye under the ice is on the right, the way that it was during the dyeing process. Okay, so let's take a look at the dye over the ice shirt first. This shirt looks more watercolor-like, and there's a lot of the royal purple, which is the color that I placed in between all the colors. That kind of makes sense because if you remember when I put it on top of the ice, it kind of just started to spread out. So I did expect there to be quite a bit of that color on the shirt. I do have a few more gaps in color too. If you'll notice, like up where the royal purple is, up near the neck of the shirt, I have some areas that don't have a whole lot of color on them. I did have the shirt though where it was inclined going down toward the spiral portion. So the dye was kind of running away from that area, which makes a little bit more sense too. By the way, when I spiraled the shirts where the front of the shirt would have the prettier pleats on it, and that's the side that I applied the dye to. Okay, so let's look at the dye under the ice shirt. This shirt looks really good. I mean, you can see all the different colors in it. And I mean, I see a lot of color splits. I can also see each one of the different colors that I placed on the shirt. Obviously, the blue stripe is the mom jeans. Then the almondine is that kind of mauvey, peachy color that's in the middle. And then the noble purple is the part that's up at the very top. Here again, I don't have a whole lot of that, but again, I was inclining the shirt away from that area. Okay, so let's put them side by side and compare the two shirts. Right off the bat, the dye over the ice shirt is just a lot less defined. The spiral in general is less defined. The bands of color are less defined. And the royal purple does kind of take over or overwhelm, especially the mom jeans, the almondine a little bit. But I think that those really cool blue lines coming out or radiating from the center of the spiral, that's a cool effect. I like those lighter lines. Like I said, I don't have a lot of definition up at the top of either one of these shirts, but that's because I was inclining away from that area. And I didn't want to add a lot more ice. I wanted to just kind of do this and see what would happen. The dye under the ice shirt is a lot more defined. The spiral, I mean, you can see the definite bands of color in the spiral. Lots of color splits. But the lines that are radiating out from that shirt from the center of the spiral are darker lines instead of like the lighter blue lines from the dye over the ice. And honestly, I don't see a huge effect from inclining either one of the shirts. I mean, there is some dye movement, but part of that is just, I mean, you're going to get that in any shirt. I don't know that it was really worth it for this one. I just wanted to kind of throw in an extra element to see if it made a difference. So I hear people say all the time that dye over the ice gives better color splits than dye under the ice. I purposely used really good color splitting colors on both of these shirts. And I don't know that that theory holds up on these shirts. I'm not saying that it doesn't work out on some colors or some shirts or whatever, but on these, I think I have pretty good color splits on both shirts. I think they actually show up better, in my opinion, on the dye under the ice shirt. Now, I do understand that the royal purple kind of overtook the dye over the ice shirt, so it's a little bit more difficult to see the splits on that shirt. But even in the areas where that color is not super prevalent, I don't see a lot more splits than I do on the other shirt. I'm not sure about that one. It just may be the different technique that people use, and that's the reason why they kind of have that idea. Okay, so what do you guys think about these shirts? Which one's your favorite? Do you like the dye over the ice or the dye under the ice shirt? I personally like the dye under the ice. I just like that more definition. I like the darker colors. But I really like the blue lines radiating from the dye over the ice shirt. So I guess I'm going to have to say I think they're both pretty, but I personally would choose the dye under the ice. But please drop me some comments down below and let me know which one's your favorite. And if you've enjoyed this experiment and watching the video, I sure would appreciate it if you would like it and subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you'll hit the bell, you'll receive a notification whenever I upload a new video. Thank you all for watching, and I hope you have a great day.